Live. Okay, and we're live. Um, hey guys, how it going? I am TheRFSpark, and we are here today with Podcast 6. I am here today with Commander St. Michael and Commander Starfire.
Hey, everybody.
Hello.
Uh, for this podcast, we're mostly going to be covering the recent update that's been released from FDev, the September update, or basically the kind of leaks or news, and also the fleet carriers. Basically, kind of short and simple, but we're going to cover quite a bit of it as much as we can.
Oh, and just to quickly add, we will also be doing a short part at the end on the future of Elite Danger and a little bit of speculation. 20 up.
Yes. Do we want to go ahead and start it, Michael, while I still try to fix the live stream?
Sure. All right. So our first topic of the day, everybody, is going to be the September update. Obviously, this is coming out next month, so not too far off. A couple of weeks, I believe. And it looks like we're going to get some stuff for new commanders, some different forms of training or training missions or ways to do it. Then, of course, there's the cool new livery update, which will be at least a little bit helpful for us, more experienced commanders, something that's actually for us. And then, of course, the new ARC system and the new money system. So our special guest today, Starfire, who many of you probably know is a longtime Elite player, very well known and very well respected in the community, is our special guest today, and we're really, really happy to have you, Starfire. So thank you for joining us. And I was hoping that you would start us off on this.
Yeah, sure. So the September update, I mean, these series of updates have been interesting. I mean, it has been quiet over the past couple of months, but it's going to be interesting to see what Frontier will deliver with the September update. More importantly, the ARC system, which is probably the one that's raising a lot of questions with the community. Because as we know, I mean, Frontier are working on some newer titles, so currently Elite is starting to get a bit of like monetization mechanics implemented into the game, which is like as you see at the moment, Arcs. So with Arcs, I mean, as a recap anyway, for people who are watching the stream, like Arcs is a system where you can earn what they call arcs, which is like frontier points, and you can earn them in game, or you can purchase them to purchase other cosmetics. So it either be like ship kits, paint jobs, bobbleheads, liveries, and more. Now, I guess one of the concerns that's like raising questions, I guess, of the arcs is the way how like if this is going to be introduced. There is like some like questions about whether the arc system could potentially become a pay to win mechanic, but from what has been stated by Frontier and a couple of their reports, they seem unanimously against pay to win. However, the arc system itself, the way I imagine the arc system would be implemented into the game could be through community goals or interstellar initiatives, and this is something that Frontier have been recently with the actual game. Because with the game itself, they want to try something new with these interstellar initiatives, and the way how I'd see how they would be implemented with arcs is that, say for example, you might be into the top 10, you might get some arcs points and everything. because obviously, like, even though they have stated that you can earn ARCS points in the game, um, it wouldn't be as easy to acquire it, I assume, because I mean, we are talking real money, and when it comes to like purchasing, uh, liveries or ship kits, so progression of some sort will be somewhat either competitive or grindy, um, to get these points. But it is like an optional mechanic. Um, so yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it does raise a lot of questions, but I think other people are also looking forward to the other system as well, other than ARCS, which is the how they're going to be implementing ship tutorials for when you start the. Um, so another thing that they noted, which is this. So rather than like starting the game in your state, it might be like Aravate or LHS 307 or something. When you start the game, like instead of that, Frontier might be just implementing like a scripted training program where, like, if you start the game, then you're going to go through a series of tutorials that guide you on how to play the game, where there might be basic flight controls, combat, navigation, super cruise, and might be some maybe like
Looks like
further
how to maybe do a few
missions.
missions as well. Like I saw that in some of it.
Yeah, yeah, it's stuff like that. I mean, like, it could have been implemented earlier on, but then again, they're also doing voiceover things as well for your ship computer. Because I know that currently there is some voiceovers for the current training missions in Elite, but they have stated that like this will be like your in-game in-ship voiceover, so the
I
actual
guess your
ship will
Kovas then.
actually
So, yeah.
guide you. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, they might even have like maybe a system. Uh, it really depends. Like if you're able to like redo these tutorials of some sort, then maybe there might be like a voiceover thing for Kovas, but generally they're probably just going to end up using the default Kovas system, which is, I think, very. Um, but other than that, those are like the two main things. And also, along with oh, actually, I just might cover a little bit actually about the tutorial thing, because on top of that, they're also going to be doing something where I think they've already done it. Like, have they done like the starter systems? Like, they've rearranged them, or
Yeah,
Yeah.
well,
they've.
from what I understand, they basically give you two options now. Whereas you can start in
Mm,
the original starter systems, such as Aravate, but you're left into the open world, as it were, where you can be ganked and everything else. But
yeah,
now they also have the additional option of those quote unquote starter systems where they're locked to
mm,
players who are only novice or just beginning in that. And I think
yeah,
you even basically get kicked out of them once you reach a certain rank or
yeah,
and stuff like that.
yeah. You basically have to anyway, which is actually, I guess, a good system. Even though generally it wouldn't really make sense, I guess, if you wanted like a really free open uh, galaxy. But then again, it is kind of like a quality of life improvement for new beginners, and it actually kind of solves the whole problem of, like, people getting destroyed anyway in starter space, and
Well,
it helps
exactly.
people to kind of like learn the game.
Yeah, exactly. I
Mm,
think the reason that they introduced it was that, as you know, a lot of the gankers, not all of them by any means, but
mm,
some of them would just hang out in starter systems, wait for some new
mm,
sidewinder to jump through and kill them, and that can be really disheartening to a new commander, especially when the game, especially they're finally kind of helping the noobs, which I really really help because I know like when I started the game,
yeah,
there was like almost no explanation, and it was just like here's a ship, go figure out what to
yeah. That,
do.
that's the thing too. And while on the topic of that, like, even though they have mentioned that we're going to be implementing like these tutorials, uh, especially the combat tutorials. Personally, like, over my time in Elite, um, the combat tutorials aren't really in depth enough. Like, they really should cut some basics of like flight assist off, I think, like, just
Yeah,
after like
definitely.
the basics of combat, because see a lot of people in like PvP, like if you're going to be doing PvP in Elite, it's I wouldn't say it's competitive in game. I mean, it can be competitive in game, but um, the whole learning curve of learning PvP is pretty high.
Oh yeah, it's a big one.
Because yeah, because there's some several other sort of mechanics that Frontier have kind of failed to really present in these tutorials, and the most important one I think actually is the pip controls or the pip uh,
Pit
movement.
management, yeah.
So if anyone's like unaware of what pips are, pips or they're like your power priority controls. So if you look on like your ship on the right side, you'll see 3 bars. You'll see weapons, systems, and engines. And they're going to be abbreviated by like systems would be SYS, engines would be ENG, and weapons would be WP. Now, by default, when you use the arrow keys in the game, they will switch your power priorities. Not power priorities, but your pip management. Um, and even though the tutorials currently in the game do indicate that, if you move like these pips to one side, then it's gonna, increase the recharge rate of these bars. Yes, but that's not its primary uh, functionality, because there is something that's actually commonly learnt out in I'd say mostly the PvP area, but like it's this we're starting to like here in LL, like we're starting to like just show this just to anyone in general, because this is actually very useful.
Hmm.
But if you put like full pips, like 4 pips into systems, then it's going to strengthen your shield by, was it 2.30? So
Yeah,
uh,
237. That's exactly right.
yeah.
Yep.
So if you don't have that, or if you just have 0 pips to systems and someone attacks you, or maybe even just be an AI ship, your shields would be weaker than having them at
Significantly.
full.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I want to make that
So
clear. Significantly.
yeah, and I guess even the case as well too that like maybe there might be a PvP player that might go against a PvP player, but they probably both have the same shield strength. But the PvE player is probably confused because he's probably hitting the PvP player like thinking like, why isn't it doing much damage to this character? Whereas, there's other players like doing a lot of damage to me. That's because of the pip management, and it also depends on how you set up your resistances for your shields. But primarily, pip management is important because if you don't set that properly, this is like an ongoing thing. Like this is something that happens during gameplay, so you will have to change it depending on the situation. Um, so depending on like your weaponry, like if you have a lot of distro heavy weaponry, you have to put them a lot of pips into weaponry. But then you might have to switch back to systems if you're under attack, or you might have to change them up in a way where like you have both shield advantage and also like weapon effectiveness or something against another ship. So
Yeah, I just want to
I
add to clarify to what you're saying, Starfire, for like
yeah.
people who are wondering, like where all your pips are to assist and that increase your shield strength. That actually does not work in reverse. So
Mm,
when you're firing your weapons, you just need the bar to be full enough to fire them. If you have all 4 pips of weapons, you're not doing more damage with those weapons. So
mm,
it's interesting that that's not true across the board in the sense of
yeah.
if I put more pips to sis, my shields will be stronger. If you put 4 pips to weapons, you are not having stronger weapons. You're just able to
Mm.
fire them more
Yeah, and even
often,
another
I
thing
guess.
too, like even more pips to engines also increases a bit like your agility as well, like with your
Yes, that's true.
because it's things like these that are missing in these tutorials, and I personally think that Frontier should really dive into this a little bit in depth, so that way players really can like know what things like maybe this could be like the advanced tutorials maybe, so you might cover some basic tutorials and everything, but then after completing these tutorials, um, the game will kind of like put you in the game, you're ready to go, but it shows an additional screen saying that if you want to learn some advanced things, definitely go through this next stage of tutorials. You might have an option to skip them. You're like, yeah, okay, I'm just going to go past these, or you can just go through the advanced tutorials and stuff and then learn a bit more about the game. So I think that really needs to be put in the game, because really, like, a lot of this information, especially even just PvP itself, like, a lot of people do find that like PvP players are pretty strong in combat, but that's only because that the community around PvP have built a lot of information from the game without the need of like these tutorials and everything, but they just
They
generally just
train each
because of
other,
gameplay.
yeah, and
Yeah,
share info.
it's because of that experience in general that they actually learn so much about the game. Even just points of like, making sure your ship is literally the best. But overall, it also depends as well on the pilot itself, the ability, because not every
Definitely,
ship is
definitely.
invincible.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Um, but
Oh, I
yeah,
wanted to
that is.
quickly add. I do want to
Yeah.
say that there is one advantage to pips to weapons, which is the cooling effect, which I did forget about.
Oh
Which is
yeah. Yeah.
the more pips to weapons. Like the one advantage it doesn't give you more damage, but if you have like very heavy
Mm,
heat weapons that are really heavy on your heat, it will help you dissipate your
mm,
heat. But keep in mind, as Starfire said, you do not want to have all those pips and weapons if
mm.
you're being under fire, because if you have all those
Yeah.
pips at assist and your shields are 1/4 or maybe even
Mm,
more weaker,
yeah.
significantly weaker.
You have to be really considerate and actually like be really tactical in like what you're actually doing with pips, because
Yes.
it's not always just like setting a pre-configured like pips when you start the day. Those pips can change during gameplay depending on who you're going to be dealing with. But in
Yeah.
most cases, if you're just doing like, I don't know, trading, you maybe don't really have any contact at all whatsoever during game. Sure, maybe 4 pips to weapons. Well, no, maybe no. Sorry, my bad. 2 pips to 2 pips to systems, and maybe 4 pips to engines.
Yeah.
But if you get pulled, then yeah, it's a matter of case of maybe like managing that so you can get out there. Um, but then again, yeah, it's just tutorials that really need to be improved on further. I think like the
At least
case of like,
this is going in the right direction, I feel, at least, even if they're not in depth more.
yeah. Yeah, it's still a bit of a right direction anyway. I think the having like a scripted sequence of tutorials when you start the game is really useful, because players are probably players will just probably just play straight away when they play the game. They're not probably going to
Yeah.
look at tutorials. It's probably going to take them too long. So you're better off putting that in the game when they start the game. Otherwise, they're going to feel that this is going to take too long to learn. Um, so having that there and everything is already useful as it is. It would be great if they have some additional tutorials to kind of like better explain some in-depth things about the game, so that way if players want to explore some further things about combat or whatever role that they want to do in the game, maybe even if it's like carriers, you might have a little training mission that does like simulating a carrier. How you do that, you know um, all these little things, it helps the player, like even having a frequently asked questions, or maybe even a tutorial resource page like in the game, so you can just, it's like a manual, like you just look up things whatever related to the game and you can find information in detail of what it is, like even if it's pit management, it just goes into depth of that. I think that itself also would be super helpful. Like if you don't have the advanced tutorials, at least have a, what I'd say, a commander's booklet or commander's manual, so that way you can see everything about the game. Like whether it's thugoids or combat tactics, whatever. In-depth things. I think that
Yeah.
should actually help. Um,
Good for the codex.
but yeah, it's not like the codex, but a little bit more like in-depth, and everything. You can like scroll through things, open them and everything. It's like a library. Um, yeah, but I think that covers most of September's updates. There is like one more feature that September update does cover, and that is the livery stuff. This is part of the ARCS system in a way, but
Yeah, it
it's a
is.
nice little quality of life improvement. But it allows you to customize your ship from the main menu. That's a nice addition. That's actually pretty nice. That's pretty good. I mean, if you're let's just say like you're exploring You might be all the way in Beagle Point. There probably is no stations out there at the moment.
No,
Um,
no.
and like you log out of the game, you come back. Uh, Maybe you saw like a really interesting or like decal or something on the store. You buy that, but then you realize like, oh no, you gotta dock at a station to be able to customize it. Well, not anymore, because in the September update, it now allows you to customize that through the main menu, which is actually very nice because um, the only downside though to this is that like the only drawback is that you can't customize your other ships from the main menu. You can only customize the current ship that you're piloting, like whether it might be docked or whether it might be out in space. The one that you're currently piloting will be the one that you can only customize, which
Yeah,
it's a bit of a letdown, I guess. Like if you like the fact that you can't customize other ships, but then again, customizing your current ship anyway from the main menu, um, without the need to actually dock is pretty nice, I guess. Uh, yeah, but that is pretty much just a small note anyway of just generally like the September update overall. So uh, yeah.
definitely. So Spark, do you have anything you want to add on September update? And then I guess I'll go third if for that.
For this new livery update, it makes me curious if everything that's in the shop will be purchasable. Be purchasable. Yeah, I can't speak. Through.
Purchasable.
Yeah, thank you. Half asleep currently. Apparently. It makes me curious if all the stuff in the in-game shop is going to be available or not. Like, is it going to be limited? Is it going to be restricted? Is it going to be changed out every so often? Is there going to be just special editions? Oh, makes me kind of curious to see how it all is going to be.
Yeah, that's a side thing actually I gotta add too. Like, I mean, I'm probably might be nitpicky maybe, but like, I mean, I know that currently Frontier does have like unique like skin jobs or paint jobs and stuff on particular streams and everything. So like say like you might have like an exclusive Frontier decal and everything you want to put on your ship. You have to be like a winner and everything on the stream. Well, that I mean, other than like all the other like paint jobs I guess you can find in a Frontier store, like I really think that they should really put some really like some nice ones. Like I know they can actually do it. Like they've got the software and they've got the artists to actually create um, some of these things. But yeah, some just some more like interesting like things to like put in your ship or something. Like it just where they might just be very appealing, but it might require like some kind of, I don't know, grind or cost or something. Like you might be able to earn it or something with arcs points, but it might be perhaps something that you can unlock during a community goal or interstellar initiative where like top 10 commanders can choose or they might win a like an exclusive paint job. I don't think I mean sure like a bubblehead is okay, but like if it's just like the same thing over and over again in like say for example squadron competitions, then it's just yeah, you got you got to put some variety into your game. Otherwise, players are just gonna be like, well, this is just the same old paint job, So you got to really surprise your players and just give them something, I guess, to really bite on, I guess. And I guess that's the way. Like Frontier are already going for a monetization system, and they're already doing that anyway to keep their players engaged with Elite. So um, yeah, they really need to. If they're doing that, then they really need to put something like that in there just to give players a bit of a, I don't know, reason to get something that might, special or unique to their taste.
All right. Well, before we move on to the next subject, I guess I'll just give my final thoughts on the September update, which I think you guys covered most of it. So I'll just give this a quick what I think. I think the library update is going to be really nice. I do hope at some point that was already mentioned that they make it available to ships that are not necessarily the ones you're on. So it'd be
Mm,
really great if I can just change the libraries on the ships.
mm,
Um, Now, interestingly enough, when they say ships, I'm assuming they also include on the ship you're on the library for your SR and fighter. I don't think that's ever been conclusively stated, but I would assume if they're at least on the ship you're flying, that they will be.
Yeah, they should be able to, hopefully.
I would think so. I will say, as far as the arcs thing, because we didn't cover that very much, or not as much. I do think that Starfire is right that it will probably be linked to some in-game stuff, so maybe get more people involved, so you might be able to earn more arc points if you do CGs or interstellar initiatives or things like that. But it's also been pretty clear from, and I can even read a direct quote here, that cosmetic comes simply by playing the game. So I don't, and they said, direct quote, "We will not ask commanders to change how they play. Simply being an active player engaging with the game is all that is required." So I do
Yeah.
think you will be able to earn some arc points even without doing those things, just by logging in. Who knows? It could be even just logging in for 2 minutes, just literally turning your game on and turning it off could be enough. But I do think you'll be able to earn some arc points in that way. So, and as far as the training simulators, I just think anything that helps new commanders is great, because I think I mentioned this very quickly earlier in the podcast, where I said and a lot of new commanders had this. None of these training simulators were available when I started. So even the current one, except for, like, I think there might have been a few basic ones to go to through the main menu, but in general, I was very blind going into this game, and and so anything that I think helps new commanders, because I think not only does Elite have a big learning curve for PvP, I think Elite has a big learning curve, period, if you're not used to flight games anyway. Now, if you've played space games or flight games a lot and that's kind of your bag, then you're probably not going to have much of an issue. But if you're more of an FPS player, RPG player, come from like a slightly different background, and you're like, hey, I want to try something new, I think the learning curve for this game can be pretty big. And there's not a lot of direction in this game, because the whole point of this game is it's very much you go do what you want to do. So there's not a lot of linear to it, where it's like, hey, go do this or go do this. It's just more like, hey, you're in a ship, go do what you want. And a lot of pilots kind of just get into their ship and are just like, what do I do now? So anything that helps that process, which I don't think this will solve all of those issues by any means, I think is great. But I think Starfire and Spark have covered most of everything. So let's get into what everyone really wants to talk about, what the entire Elite community is talking about, for that matter.
The
Yes.
meat and potatoes.
Fleet carriers. December.
Carriers.
Yes,
Oh,
the
man.
meat of the sandwich, as it were.
The biggest update.
Yeah. Okay. Starfire started off last, and I think Starfire, I really want his insight. But Spark, do you want to say anything real quick before we move on to our special guest opinion on all this?
Fleet carriers, majestic garages on crack.
What a unique way to describe it. Majestic garages on crack. Okay. All right. Anything else, or should I just let Starfire dive right on then?
I am very excited for fleet carriers, but I also hope, not to sound like a spoiled brat, but I do hope there's a little bit more to this. But I guess in time we'll find out more, and probably, hopefully, with a beta to flesh out some bugs. But yeah, that's. I mean, I'll add on to stuff.
There is a private beta going on right now, but that's just for something else. So.
All right. Well, it sounds like Spark is, if nothing else, super excited. So, Starfire, considering your knowledge of not only Elite, but for those who don't know, Starfire is literally training to become a dev. So, hey guys, he's going to be making your future games. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
He's not going to be working for Frontier probably, but he will be making
No.
game in the future. So,
Yeah.
I would
Well, I'm
love
actually
to
already
have.
am.
Oh, okay, already is. So,
Well,
but
for PAX, but it's just something different. So.
Oh, that's really cool. But yeah, but not only with your, like I said, massive knowledge about Elite, but your in-depth knowledge about the industry and yourself being a dev. What do you think? What about fleet carrier?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I'd say, like, well, obviously last year, there obviously has been problems, Frontier internally, and they've been trying to like develop, I guess, squadrons, but like due to feedback, then they actually push it further because a lot of this demand, really, like the majority. So for anyone that doesn't know, or probably unaware, maybe a recap, but Squadrons previously was originally intended to be for squadrons. So if you purchase a carrier for your squadron, then your squadron can use it. You can take it anywhere. The other thing is that like it would have requirements, so you might have to use materials and data to make it jump to certain areas. However, the majority, or like I guess like a lot of people on the forums, were demanding personal carriers because I guess like in a way people kind of wanted to feel like they built something. I guess that's like something that's really achievable in the game. So the developers had to push that back rather than having it deliver on Q4 last. Um, and ever since then they've been developing it. So now with the new update that they've kind of like announced with the carriers, you can now get your own carrier for like yourself as a commander, which is actually, I guess, pretty amazing. I mean, considering that you don't have to have a squadron to purchase a carrier, you can now buy one for yourself. Um, However, the cost of that, nobody knows just yet. I mean, for all I know, it could even be like 500 million or 600 million. This is just a rough guess. This isn't like official,
Yeah.
so yeah. But carriers in design. So the design of carriers, just after looking at a couple of videos of the new announcement, um, by the looks of things, I mean, yes, you'll be purchasing like one carrier. The other kind of like variants that they showed off as support ships, so they'll be like tagging along your carrier. But I really hope they design some functionality with these carriers because um, the main thing, like, yes, carriers are coming, but the thing that they really need to pull off with this update is the functionality of these carriers. And I actually personally think that if they spent so much time with these carriers during this year developing them and iterating them on them further, then I think that there might be a personal like interface that you interact with for the carriers. So you'd probably use the galaxy map to tell your carrier to go from A to B. The support ships will follow them through,
I would assume that as
and
well. Yeah.
you can, yeah. Um, Now look at the other variants. You got your mining, you got mercenary, uh, trading,
Bounty
exploration.
hunter,
Uh,
explorer, trader. Yeah.
yeah. I'd say the current loadouts of these is a bit blurry, I guess, at the moment because we don't know much about it at the moment. But just from best guess of like looking at like things like the exploration variant, where it's stating that you can customize modules. Um, I'd say a best guess that, like for example, you might be exploring like let's just say Bernard's Loop. You're in your carrier, you got an exploration variant with you. I'd say that this exploration variant would provide a bonus or like a helper in your exploration, so you might be able to command it. I wouldn't say commandeer it because I'll get onto that topic later. But the way of how like they would act, I guess, in the game is that they would probably provide some sort of bonus. So like let's say like you want to explore a system, you can do that. These support ships will help speed up that process, I guess, or maybe they might even branch out to other systems and explore them for you, and then they might come back to the mothership or your carrier ship and then deliver the cartographic data to you. Uh, Maybe perhaps if it finds anything interesting, then it might report that back as well. Like, we found some interesting things in these specific systems. Maybe you might be able to check them out, and then, you know, it might give you some pointers then on like finding specific things. Uh, the problem of this, though, as I was getting to, is that the way of how this is being approached, like if this is the way of how these ships work, then it could be a bit of a problem for generally like the overall single player experience, like you in the first person of a ship, because to me it's actually starting to feel like it's becoming automated. So you might be sitting on
Yeah. A
your
lot of point
carrier.
and click.
Yeah, it's all point and click now. Like you could tell like your support ships to explore some things and it might do that. Um, and you just click and point and click. I mean, obviously you will need to gather resources to make the ship jump. Um, maybe even perhaps. I mean, I actually really have no idea what these requirements are, but it could even be commodities for I know. But maybe like
I'm
for
gonna
say
guess
like you
some
might
kind
have
of
to
material, maybe polonium or something.
definitely something like that, or maybe you might have to store like hydrogen fuel on these things. Like maybe even another
That's
thing
an
too, like
interesting idea. I have not heard people
yeah.
say that, but that is a very interesting idea. Like you would have to buy tons of hydrogen and actually keep it, which actually makes sense if you think about it, because that is a fuel source.
Yeah. Yeah, hydrogen fuel because I guess like the only thing they have to like redo with the commodity is that they're gonna have to like up the price a bit so that way it does certainly cost like a lot to like pay for like this hydrogen fuel, and you can use it to like store I guess like on your ships to like move around and stuff. I mean, I think that's probably a way to if they do it like the material method, then that probably might be a bit of a pain in terms of grind.
Oh
Um
yeah.
but maybe perhaps like they can really extend the range on this thing. Like,
Well, it's
um,
already said 500 light years for the fleet
oh,
kit.
I just mean like the variety, like the
Oh,
ways of things you can do. So, let's just say you might have like a exploration convoy. You know, like you buy some fuel for your fleet carrier. And your fleet carrier like runs out of fuel, so you decide to jump to another system with. Let's just say you have two support variants. You got like you got a support ship that's like does mining. You got another support ship that does exploration. So you might have two of them following you. You might go to a has res or something, do some mining. That mining support ship will gather all those commodities from you, and then you can use that to take back to the ship to generate hydrogen fuel. Um, so that's another way they can do it. I mean, it's another fun way to do things. But like, if it's just going to be a data or material grind purely just by combing a planet, then yeah, it's not going to be. You have to really be like considerate and really thoughtful of the process of which a player is going to acquire these commodities and come back in a way that like this repetitiveness feels and not grindy all the time.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
because you have to, yeah, like these people like for you know like uh, depending on the requirements of these things, like if the requirements aren't so much and you can like make these things jump, you know, pretty far or something in a short amount of time, then go like a really useful tool for exploration, you know, deep exploration. You might reach areas that really like other explorers haven't really actually reached before. You know, it's also I guess the feeling as well like you
It
having
literally
like
makes new stars available, because I believe there are
yeah,
stars that are not reachable unless you have some of these
yeah,
massive jump ranges. So it literally makes some unreachable
yeah.
stars reachable.
Mm. I mean, I guess like even though it just kind of makes neutral stars redundant, I mean, I guess maybe even at the same time, the pricing of these ships, um, that would obviously be significantly high because that would be kind of like an in-game asset that you would use in the game. Because before any of that, you'd have to do everything anyway, just normally. Um, So these are like for the folks who just want to commandeer like massive fleets and maybe take their friends with them. So that's another thing too. Um, it would be interesting as well that they need to implement some sort of mechanic where like maybe like if you invite your friends or something, maybe you have a squadron, maybe you might be able to connect the squadron up with the carrier and then you might be able to tether it. So players might have the option to like teleport or transfer their ship to um, the carrier. So, you
Well, they
know,
have
like
said
that
you're able
way
to give permission to your friends to use it. Now, I would
yeah.
assume that if you like let's say if you were doing an exploration trip like you were just saying,
Mm,
if and three of my buddies like we want to do a crew, I would assume that if they dock their ships at my station and they're in them, long as the ships are actually on and I jump, that they would come with me. I would
mm.
assume that's
Oh,
how it works.
I mean, I just mean in like in a way where like if you have a bunch of friends in your private group or maybe in a group or whatever or something, then they might have the option to just instantly join your so
Oh,
it's
that'd
kind
be
of like multi
nice.
crew. Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay, like a multi crew. Okay, only being able to physically come there.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe
Yeah, that'd be really nice.
I mean if they want to like maintain some sort of like don't know, realistic approach to something, since they already have delays for ship transfers, then you could perhaps have the option to buy ships for your carrier, but then have them accessible for anyone who joins your so whether they can use those ships and everything, whatever they want. I mean, obviously there is a risk that they can blow it up, but I mean that's kind of like on you anyway. But uh, uh, yeah, that's something they can do. I mean, obviously the scope of that though. I mean, even just talking about all of these things anyway, or this functionality, but carriers that we might not even know just yet. The scope or like the deliverable level of this is significantly high anyway for like such a small feature. When I was a small feature, it's a pretty large feature anyway for the game. And you just think of all that functionality really like within these carriers. It does make sense for them to actually really spend this entire year working on this, because it would certainly take them a long time to do. Because Frontier,
especially with their limited staff. Yeah.
yeah, they only consist of about something like 600 staff or something, but they have multiple staff working on other titles. So the newest one is Planet Zoo, but they have different divisions or departments working on multiple titles. So you have,
Hmm.
Jurassic World, you have Planet Zoo, Planet Coaster, and then you
Planet
have
Coaster,
Elite.
Planet Zoo. Yeah.
Yeah, and as much as Elite is a little bit of Frontier's baby, um, they have been working obviously on the newer titles, and they haven't actually really put much, I guess, in terms of staff involvement into Elite, because I mean it is certainly hard anyway for a AAA company to really like maintain not only just KPIs but really like the stability of the company, because you need some form of like revenue or some form of income to come from somewhere, and it is hard for AAA studios. Whereas if you got an then it is easier because you have less staff and you can easily focus on one game. Uh,
Yeah. Exactly.
but yeah, like yeah, larger companies have a bit of a harder time. But I mean, then again, if they pull off something really impressive though with these carriers, and they actually show some in-depth functionality with commandeering these ships and having like an actual use, then yeah, no, I'd say that they've really, it was worth the wait, for this year. Even though there hasn't been much of a roadmap anyway last year. Um, but
Well, it's not like FDev's been very known for being super open about what they're going
no,
to do in the future. Anyway, if anything, they're kind of notorious for being a little bit closed mouthed or shut lipped on it.
yeah, I mean, considering the narrative and everything, they really don't want to spoil anything. And I guess at the same time as well, like if they actually have something really interesting to show off, then I guess in a way that they have to kind of like wait and see until when like they actually finally deliver the product, and then they'll actually announce it to the public. Uh, but yeah, then again, like they do personally. I mean, this is a side thing, but um, I mean, there was a few incidents recently where like some people from the public did actually kind of like harvest some information, I guess, from internal office of Frontier, but that was only because really that Frontier hasn't really shown much in terms of content during that year, and it made a lot of people really impatient knowing that Carriers is coming and not much word is heard from it. And I think during that, Frontier should have really I don't know whether it might be just putting like behind the scene videos or maybe some teasers of particular things. Like doing that during development of particular content is something that keeps your players engaged while also not making them impatient. It keeps players excited, but it doesn't make them impatient in a way where like they're just going to harm your company in a way where they're going to get people to harvest information from internal office and stuff. It's sad when that happens, and seeing that and everything, like it's you want to excite your players, but at the same
Exactly.
time, yeah, it really all depends about how you do this in a way where like how you deliver this update in a way while actually keeping players excited, engaged during development. Otherwise, you're going to make an impatient community a bit angry. So yeah, no, they're doing well. I mean, for now anyway, of what they've shown at the moment. But it would be nice to actually see a little bit more involvement, I guess, or engagement with teasers or particular content reveals, maybe of particular things, even if it's just small things. Even if it's just like a little bit of like an asset or just artwork or something. Just to make your player base excited. Games like Star Citizen, even though it's a game, yeah, I mean they're actually developing it by Cloud Imperium Games, but they have like emails or just like newsletters, like showing some content, that they're working on at the very end, and it keeps their players engaged. And it's not just that, but they also have like weekly like talks about like behind the scenes, how they like develop things, because at the same time too, like people are kind of like interested in like what developers do behind their games, and it's always interesting to like see like how they do things, like whether it's like to do with the engine or with like their pipeline of like particular content or audio design, all of that. They did
Yeah.
that before recently, but I think doing that a little bit more when you're doing like big updates, like it would be worth like doing that anyway along the way, so that way it keeps your players engaged. So that's just like a side thing to note.
Um, with the fleet carriers, personally, I hope they're. I kind of want them to stay away from BGS and power play aspects because I feel like that'd be very unfair to a lot of people. But I'm
Mm,
hoping that these carriers can basically be a new way of player contact, new
mm,
way of marketing, like how markets work in this game. Uh,
mm.
Basically, shipyards and outfitting. I kind of think it would be cool if these stations could be like automated like a normal station, kind of
Oh
like
yeah,
supply them
I
with goods, supply them with arms, supply them with ships, either ordering them or going out and getting them.
mm,
At least that's my
yeah, I
aspect.
like
I kind of want them to be so in depth that it's like you actually kind of have to like not just point and click, but actually think about, okay, I can only have
mm,
so many assets on board. Need to keep the best things in stock. Yada yada yada.
mm,
At least that's my hope for it.
Yeah, I'll be interested. Like, if you do have to do like what Starfire said earlier with like the hydrogen fuel stocking, that means you're really going to have to plan out your trips. So you're going to need to know how much fuel you're going to need and how much fuel you're going to need to
mm,
get back. Because let's say you decide, okay, I'm going to take this sucker to Beagle Point, just as a hypothetical. There's not going to be a station out there for you to buy hydrogen fuel.
mm,
And there might not be, even if it's assuming it's materials, there might not be a planet that has the exact material you need, or
mm,
anything like that. So you're definitely, especially if you're going to some of these star systems that are, were, I guess, quote unquote unreachable, but now with a 500 light year jump range will be reachable. You're going to need to
mm,
be prepared and do those situations. I mean, I think what this really opens up to me even more is something like take a distant worlds idea. Imagine instead of just everyone coming in their condos or their Phantoms or their DBXs or whatever they like to fly, like you can bring a whole party with you just on your fleet carriers and work together to say fuel the ship and get it going and basically carry a bit of humanity, meaning stations, which are so critical to us as pilots, with
mm,
you. I mean, I think the possibilities are really awesome. I think even for something like PvP, and this is something I had said to a few people, is in current PvP, most PvP ships have terrible jump range, or they don't have a
mm,
fuel scoop, or they don't have something else. Imagine being able to take your carrier with your entire PvP fleet to a hotbed system. So, if, for instance, if
mm,
you decide, hey, I'm going to fight in the CG all this week, and I'm probably going to end up doing a lot of PvP, instead of having to ship over my FDL, ship over my cutter, ship over my vet, or whatever you happen to fly, or all of them. Some people, like, I know Spark, I'm pretty sure you, Starfire, most of us have multiple PvP ships. I don't have to go, well,
mm,
which is my priority? Or which do I have to spend a lot of money on? I can now jump my whole PvP fleet to that system, and I can have a private base to work from. because one thing we haven't mentioned is these ships are not going to be destructible. Now whether that means not disableable, I'm not sure. Like maybe they'll work like a mega ship where you can like disable them or something. I don't know. But in general, you're not going to hit a rebuy screen with them. So I don't think you're going to have an issue jumping them to a PvP system, or at least a system next door to the PvP system,
I think
a staging system as we call it sometimes.
I think what makes me curious about these things is it going to be where it stays in game, or is it going to be a thing where it goes away once the main player logs off?
See, I think it's going to have to be persistent because that's been a big
Yeah,
question
it
about
has
these.
to.
Will they? I feel like it has to be because if you're going to allow other commanders who are your friends to be on it or use it, it has to be around when you're not there, right? Because like imagine
Yeah.
like if I park at my friend's carrier, right, and he jumps in system, like I've logged off, but he jumps somewhere when I'm off. And then what? Do I log back in and I'm like in free space, or assuming it was lost? Like I feel like there's no choice if you're going to allow other commanders to drop in it for
I
to be
think
anything but persistent.
I think also having like them persistent also goes to show truly like how large the galaxy is. Well, not galaxy is, but like how many players that actually play Elite. Like if you have a lot of commanders that have all the money and everything, and they all purchase a lot of carriers, and you're going to see them, across every system you go to. I guess in the bubble, it gives. I guess in a way it gives a bit of life to the game. You may see that there's stations and stuff here and there, but the thing that makes the game live is seeing player content in the game. Otherwise not seeing that, it just feels empty. It just doesn't feel like it's a player influence galaxy. you know um and like I know that like Elite originally was supposed to be a single player experience because that's what it was before when the original Elite came out. Uh, Frontier weren't really prepared to do something related to multiplayer. However, they actually managed to do it with Elite Dangerous. And even though they did come across some challenges along the way, they ended up making it a multiplayer experience. Of course, there is some issues with Elite's multiplayer. Over time, hopefully they'll be able to correct them. Maybe even implement a different sort of system to the networking, or maybe even improvement to it. Whatever it is that improves this experience, I guess, for network. But that's just like another topic to talk about. But I guess the thing as well, like coming from carriers, like as Spark mentioned, uh, the idea behind selling things and everything, like storing things in your ship and selling like a ton of things like on the market, like that is something that I actually want to see as well too in Elite, because like you've gone to a point in the game where like you have so much money, you decide to buy a carrier, you invest in it. It's obviously going to take a chunk of your credit asset and everything, your credits
Oh
and
yeah.
everything. You might let's just say like a carrier is like, I don't know, 2 billion, you have like 3 billion, and when you spend 2 billion, you're down to like 1 billion of credits and stuff, so you have to sell a bunch of ships and you invest a lot into this carrier. Now obviously it's going to like set you a little bit of setback, so obviously you want to gain that money back up and everything again. But you also want to experience like a fun experience with these carriers, and storing commodities and everything, like you might be doing mining, you might be doing trading, you know, all that money you get, all those commodities and everything that you acquire, you put in these ships and you sell in a large amount. I'm talking like 3,000 tons or 5,000 tons or even 10,000 tons, you know, um, because normally ships these days are around, I don't know, what, 400 tons, 500 tons.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean this is going to be massively bigger.
yeah. So owning these things, you have to feel that you have a lot of, with these ships. Like you have to feel like I don't know, a captain. You have to feel like you're owning I guess, a corporation, a moving corporation that's like moving with you. You want to feel that you're selling a lot of things, or you're getting a lot of things. You're commandeering a ship with maybe a lot of players on it that do things for you. pretty much like squadrons. It's that itself that I think brings some really interesting interactive gameplay, and also, as you mentioned, so Michael, about the combat orientation around this. Like, sure, at the moment, the carriers you can't really destroy yet. Maybe, who knows? I don't know. But if they were, and you could customize your weapons, your modules on these carriers, and you could get into, I don't know, carrier fights, with these support
Oh wow,
ships.
that'd be
Like,
crazy.
this implements, like, you could have, like, for example, like 4 carriers fighting it out, with multiple players and everything, and maybe perhaps a better networking system or something in this instance, and, you know, fight to the death and everything. You might disable a carrier. I mean, of course, like, there has been trailers of where, like, capital ships can explode, but I mean, that is possible. They can do that. But if they only just want, like, a system where, like, you just got to disable it, then sure, maybe you can only disable it. Maybe it might retreat to a nearby system, and it notifies the captain of that ship, or the commander of that ship, and it's pretty much just like decking it out, fighting it out, um, you know, going against, like, these carriers and everything, and really actually interacts some, like, interesting gameplay. I think the only drawback maybe is that, like, obviously, like, the ship guns might be a bit of a problem against
Yeah,
player
right.
ships because they might be a bit too strong. Yeah, so I think balancing them, well, not balancing them, but maybe, like, adjusting the damage model of carrier ships, like, even if they do have guns, or even the support ships. Like, if you're doing definitely, yeah, you definitely want to be play testing a lot to make sure the damage model is just right, so that way it's not too strong or it's not too weak and everything, but it's enough to really put up a fight against maybe even other carriers and everything. Maybe you might even have a system where if you're up against an enemy carrier, then your carrier deploys some carrier specific weaponry. And then you might have, like, anti, well, what do you call out there and everything in the real world, anti-aircraft weaponry and stuff, but
AA.
except it would be like anti-ship. Yeah, AA. You have specific
Anti-space
weaponry like that.
weaponry. It'll be an
Yeah,
ass.
anti-space weaponry. Um, it's things like that. Just like has specific weaponry for specific tasks. And I know, like, stations that only just, I don't know what, I think they have 2 variants, but, like, generally, like, both of them just kill you anyway. But
Yeah, right.
um, yeah, but splitting that up to have different roles, like, maybe you might have, your flak weaponry, you might have, like, your close range weaponry, all sorts of things. And I think maybe iterating on that role model of these weapons, having them have a little bit of, like, a purpose rather than just everything shooting at you. I think that might actually resolve a bit of the problems, I guess, maybe with the damage. Because even with, like, capital ships as well, like, capital ships just don't feel as powerful as they was before. I think because I think in several other updates beforehand, like, they used to be a bit strong. Nowadays, they just feel a bit too weak. But um, that's actually another thing too. They really need to, like add capital ships to, like, the support ship line. Considering that they have this now, because like, with support ships, like, sure, but, like, the capital ships, like, I've looked at a few capital ships in game, like the Majestics, for example. They have a little bit of a hangar, like, behind and also the front of the ship. Um, so I think that, like, I mean, if they are doing it, fantastic. But if they're not, they could really do that, where, like, they include the Majestics and the
That can always
Farragus
come in the
into
future too,
the
you
line.
know.
Yeah, like, I can see this kind of, like, happening anyway. Like, there could be something where, like, you have to progress anyway, like, further in the Empire Federation rank. Like, you might have to get up to King or whatever the higher rank is for Federation. But, like, once you reach the maximum rank, then you can unlock the you can access the Majestic or Farragut line for, like, your support ships. Um, that I think would actually be an interesting uh, reward, I guess. Like, if you are going for an in-game thing like carriers. Um, but yeah, there's a couple of things they could also do as well, even with, like, that line itself. But yeah, I don't want to go in. details of that since that's a different topic. But in summary, yeah, carriers, we really don't even know much about them, but and I know everyone agrees here, like everyone would actually be expecting, carriers to actually have some sort of functionality that's in depth, like something that makes it fun. Otherwise, if it's just going to be a carrier with like support ships, you can just pick a load out and they don't do anything, then there's just no use for it. There's no fun elements to it other than just a decoration. So they really need to work on this, and I really hope that when they give more details about this, I really hope that they actually indicate that there is actually like in-depth UI design and generally like design mechanics in carriers to make it fun. So that's what I hope.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with everything you just said. Spark, do you have anything else you want to add to this?
Nope, just a planetary base trying to kill me.
All right. Well, I think we've covered a lot on fleet carriers. Let me see. Is there anything else I want to add? I think most of it was covered. I kind of said in the middle of our topics there, kind of my hopes, like being able to carry your fleet for PvP systems, being able to explore with a large group, and possibly being able to get to systems that
Mm,
you couldn't get to before. I think it'll be
mm,
interesting to see how the support chips and modular stuff all works. Starfire has already covered a lot of that, but it'll be
mm,
interesting to see what the final product is. Either way, I think us as a whole, and really the elite community, seem to be pretty pleasantly surprised. I'm not sure we were all expecting this much, so it's nice to see a pleasant surprise over a overall rather dull year. So before we
mm.
conclude tonight's podcast, I do want to just take at least a few minutes, guys, to and I know we've covered this in previous topics or previous podcasts, but I, especially with Starfire here, would love to get his opinion on uh, the 2020 update and the future of Elite. So, just to quickly start off the conversation, the big rumor, as at least that I've heard, and I mentioned this in previous podcasts, is Spacelet. Do you think that's coming Starfire? What do you think the 2020 update is going to
um, I mean, look at obviously with their capabilities of the Cobra, they can certainly do it, and they have actually proven it in the past. But the problem with Frontier at the moment, I guess, with this functionality of space legs, is just that the scope of doing it is actually pretty high um, when you're actually like implementing it fully into the game, because they have to be really. I mean, considering like we're factoring in the size of the dev team here, because if you look at other games like Cloud Imperium Games, where they're working on Star Citizen, they're composed of I think 500 developers on Star Citizen, and then you have another additional 6 on Squadron 40. So you have so many people working on these games, but then you look at Frontier where they only have 100 staff, and that makes things really difficult because I myself, as I mentioned before, because I'm doing game development and I'm also like learning some experience in the industry um, as a 3D artist, like doing 3D assets for your game and working that through your pipeline for development, pretty hard. Um, and you need multiple developers working on other assets as well to integrate into your pipeline, because you know depending on the level of quality of that asset, like once you model it, you have to what they call UV unwrapping, which is a process where uh, you create coordinates for like textures to like look properly, or like they look well, like or great on the model. Because generally like models are just it's like clay in a way, like it's just default. You can only put like a flat color on it, you can't put any textures on it. So they go through that stage and they animate it in a way, so they set up like movement and everything for the animators, and then after that they then take it to the texture artists where they do all the textures, or the what they call in development PBR, or physically based rendering, um, which is generally like further finer detail through textures of like particular models. So as I mentioned, it's all these steps to build an asset, just one asset, just to integrate into, an engine like Cobra Engine, and then they have to set up the functionality for that. And doing all that, looking at carriers, for example, developing an asset like that and putting functionality on that, it is pretty high when you're going for like significant amount of detail. And when you're trying to repeat that process, but for Space Lake, um, you'll need a big dev team to do it because 3 or 4 developers doing modeling isn't going to, unless you consider how like it's going to be developed.
Well,
Like
from
for
what I understand,
example,
it's half their teams, and it's also a lot of time. So it's probably more
yeah,
like 50 people in two
mm,
years. Because, like, I mean,
yeah,
I think that's one of the reasons that I give a little more credence to the Space Legs
yeah,
idea is because this wasn't like, oh, we're going to do this in 8 months. This was 2 years with them publicly stating, hey, guys, it's going to be a little
yeah,
boring in between because the 100 guys we have working, or majority of them
yeah,
anyway, are going to be working on this.
yeah, and it overall depends on like the quality that you do because it's a lot more process than really just developing functionality of SpaceX. There's a lot of functionality that needs to be done in order to make it work and stabilized. But it is possible. I see it. I can actually see it working though for next for Frontier in terms of scope because what they can do is that they can work with their current cockpit that you have and then they can add the functionality for it to move. So I mean they already have a character model. That you can use, and with a bit of like functionality and like Cobra Engine or something, you can make it easily with your cockpit. I think it's
Well,
just the
aren't the
problem with
ships
that.
already pre-designed for space legs? At least that's something I've always heard. Like,
Um,
for instance, like when you're in VR, you have the ability to walk around your ship. Now, true, you have this like headless body that's all creepy sitting in your pilot seat, but you can walk around your ship in VR.
I think it's uh, I think it's because of just the way they designed it as well. Because like the canopy itself, because they're using what they call spatial HUD design. So spatial is uh HUD interface that's rendered in the 3D world. So that is like, what you see in Elite Dangerous where like you have a 3D HUD. Um, because
Yeah,
they've just done that, um, obviously like while they're doing that, they obviously want to make the player feel immersed. So what they've done is that they've created a pretty extensive canopy or cockpit for the player to experience, like whether it's through cameras or all sorts of things. No matter how the player will do it, it's something he will see that put a lot of effort into creating the canopy or cockpits of these ships. That being said, um, I mean, there were conversations of SpaceX back during Kickstarter where they were going to do it, I guess, in the near future. And I guess that's kind of like why they designed these cockpits anyway, especially if you look at the Anaconda or the Cutter. It's very open space. It looks like something that, you can move around in.
yeah,
And
it does.
even,
Exactly.
yeah, and even looking at like the cinematics as well, like the Commander Chronicles, that's another example of like players, not players, but commanders moving around these cockpits. So I think it's certainly possible. It's certainly easy for them to do. But the problem that they're facing, I think, with SpaceX is that how are they going to make it fun? Because it's going to end up a little bit like multi-crew in a way if they just delivered it straight away using like functionality in your cockpit. Because like even though like you might be able to move around your cockpit, that's the only thing you can do. Like you might be able to maybe like move around to the gunner area or something, like multi-crew, but it's not in a way very useful. It's just going to end up like a multi-crew mechanic. So they really need to think hard on how they integrate space legs. Like the scope of this project though that I see of them implementing anyway for space legs is significantly high. Like they have to develop interior assets, like perhaps maybe for like small areas of the station. So maybe you might have to like walk down on like the surface of like your platform. You might have to walk up to a certain area or something of the station. They have to, I guess, not only that, but they actually also have to maybe perhaps redesign. the texture quality, I guess, even of the pads themselves, because like when you walk down, like they're gonna have to like increase the quality texture resolution of the pads themselves, so that way it doesn't look very pixelated. Because I know that like if you go through the camera and you look very closely at like the ground or even like some of the buildings, like they're very low detail, low poly, as they say in game development. And that's for the reason. They don't do anything that's very high quality. Um, for things that you can't generally see with the naked. Otherwise, if they
Mhm.
do that, then it's going to have an effect to your performance of the game. So they have to consider what they call culling methods with it, where like if it's areas in which it's like too far or it's areas that you can't see, then they're going to render it out. So that way it saves time on like your performance and generally how you play the game. Otherwise, if they don't have that, then your game's going to end up like very unoptimized, like 15 frames or something.
Bogged down.
So that is like what I was mentioning before in terms of technical stuff, where like that's the thing that they have to consider. Otherwise, uh, things will become very unstable for gameplay. Um, but going back to that subject, yes, it's possible. But only if they have another team, part of Elite, that's working on it. But that team is going to have to be a little bit bigger than the ones working on carriers, because the current team that was working on carriers, like they're not gonna be able to do like interior assets for space legs just on them by themselves. You know that they need a much larger. Uh, so yeah, it's possible. I think the main struggle will be how they use it in a way where it's going to be fun for the player. Like they have to really immerse the player. They obviously can't go towards a shooter mechanic, because if they do, then they have to change the rating of the game. Um, but well, actually, no, they can. They can actually go through that mechanic, but they have to be really considerate, I guess, of like how you use a gun or like fight someone. Uh, but yeah, no, this implementing a first-person space like mechanic. It's like creating another game entirely on top of another game. So it does take some time, um, but I believe that they can actually pull it off really well.
And
Um,
I think they
yeah.
can too. So,
Same.
Spark,
Yeah.
do you wanna add anything else before we conclude our podcast?
Um, Basically, to add on to the space legs, I feel like it's something that they could probably do slowly. I don't think it's something that really should be pushed on like super hard. I think maybe like baby
Mm,
steps of just getting around the ship would be fine. I'd be perfectly
mm.
happy with that.
Yeah, I
Maybe
agree.
next update later, hey, I can walk around on the landing pad, or
Mm,
I can do something else. I think it's
mm,
something that maybe people are like full blown need it, like just like everything. And
mm.
I just think it's like, well, I mean, we didn't get all the ships at once. Why should we get everything else at once?
Yeah. Although, I mean, looking at Space Legs, like how they do it, I mean, this all sounds very high in scope, but if they had actually made multi-crew part of Space Legs, and do something along the lines of similar to Sea of Thieves, like you could actually make some really interesting gameplay, and it actually would actually make the ships, I guess, a little bit less OP, in a way, because a lot of like the big ships out there in Elite Dangerous that people engineer are pretty strong. So if you integrate a lot of multi-crew, similar to like Sea of Thieves, like you can
Yeah,
do a lot with it. Even I guess like maybe even like the smaller ships, but like it'll probably be a little bit less effort. Uh, but it would obviously have like a lot less damage than your much larger ships. But overall, space legs, multi-crew, definitely integrate both of them together. That's actually like the way to go. And maybe even like this might be scope creep, but they could even like do something, I guess, like when you dock at a station, or even if it's like um, maybe if it's like a mega ship or a carrier or something, you dock into the hangar. You can go down, you can access like a console, or maybe even like an area or something where it might have a commodity area with like other AI characters you can interact with. This is a higher scope, but I think the vision of that itself for Elite would be something that I think Braven would really want to see. Uh, but yeah, it overall depends on staff involvement, because currently they really need a lot of staff for this, and yeah, it's something they really need. But as a side note, not relating to Space Leaks, but I do see atmospheric landings being possible though for 2020, and I think maybe either space legs or atmospheric landings would be something that this Frontier might be aiming for next year. And that might be something either way next year, whatever it may be. I really hope that it'll be a really exciting year for players.
I completely agree with both of you. So I guess at this point we'll just see what happens. So
What? What?
that that
Uh,
was a good friend of ours named Terror, who I'm not even sure how got into this chat, considering it has a limited people, but she is known as the
yeah, I'm not
Squeaker.
sure.
So she just squeaked this entire podcast. Everybody, sorry for our fellow Commander Terror there.
Hmm.
But
Okay.
I think it went really well. I think we covered everything we want to talk about.
I think so as well. But
Yeah, no.
Yeah, Spark, you want to close this out?
sure. Guys, as we said before, if you have any questions or things you want to talk about, go ahead and put them in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed the video, leaving a like does help. If you have any questions that you don't feel like putting in the comments, you can reach me through Discord or Twitter. And yeah, have a good night, guys.
And
Catch you on the next one.
if
Good night. Thank
if
you,
you
everyone,
guys
for listening.
Hey, what, Starfire?
Oh, I was just saying also, just finally as well, like, if you do want to reach me as well, you can contact me too on Discord if you want. But yeah.
Actually, yeah, you know what? You can put the links for all of us, for that matter, if you'd like, Spark. If any of you have any questions about anything, or would just like to talk to us personally, we also appreciate any questions or suggestions for future podcasts. But if you just want to have like a personal, quick, hey man, what's up? Feel free to hit, I think, any of us up, right, Spark?
Yeah, I guess the best way would probably be putting the Discord usernames in.
Yeah, absolutely. I have no problem with that. I will say though, just as a quick caveat, if you do harass any of us or decide to do anything like that, I will block you. But other than that, please come ask questions.
Yeah, definitely just like provide us like anything that's constructive, just
Yeah,
that's
Could you guys send me your Discord things?
yeah.
Absolutely.
Know where that is.
Let me.
I think you can just click your own name and paste right.
I thought so too.
07? I'm not sure why it split it up like that.
But yeah, if you guys have any like questions, feel free to let us
Yeah,
know.
feel free to hit any of us up. And I will say, if you want to hit anyone up, definitely hit up Starfire, because he knows more than any of us.
I mean, probably not in time. I mean, not in terms of probably elite nowadays, but probably more so in the industry.
Yeah, this is a guy who actually helped train me to play this game, so I have mad respect for Starfire. Anyway, I just want to say one final, before we close out the podcast, I just want to say one final serious, big thank you to you, Starfire. It has been awesome to have you as a special guest. Your knowledge has been amazing. Your insight is wonderful, especially from an insider point of view, where you know a lot from a
Oh,
dev's perspective and from an actual game development perspective, like that I just don't know. So thank you.
oh, you're welcome. I mean, it's yeah. No, I just have to do whatever I can to help. I mean,
Okay, I kind of suck. Where do I find my username at?
Oh, good God. Here,
no.
Spark, I'll send you your username too. How's that?
Thank you, because I'm having a blonde moment right now. Also,
All right. So not only okay, I will send Spark his own username. There we go. And you know what? Do you need Starfires as well?
no, I got Starfires. He sent me.
Okay, you got Starfires. All right, everybody. Well, have a good night. I'm going to personally log out of this chat right now. So it was great talking to all of you as always. Please feel free to hit us up on Discord. Please give us any more suggestions or comments you have. And fly safe. And if you can't fly safe, fly dangerous. Have a good night, Commanders.
Good night, guys.
Night all.